Hey, this is a spoiler warning. There are spoilers in this video. If you haven't watched Arcane yet, do yourself a favor and go check it out before watching this video, because there are spoilers in it. This is your warning that there are spoilers. There are spoilers. Alright, so all 9 episodes are out and it was difficult trying to put everything together, but let's get started. We're stripping everything from the lore and just going off the show for the events in sequential order, the best that I possibly can. So here we go. Sometime around 200 to 300 years ago, there was a war that happened between mages who held unspeakable power that destroyed civilizations. Because of this war, Piltover was created to avoid the warmongering mages and has since lived in peace avoiding magic. Fast forward, and now we've got Piltover and the Lanes. Piltover is a relatively new city, only being 200 years old, and is considered the upper city, and the Lanes is considered the undercity. But really the two parts are divided by a section of bridges, but also the Lanes is underneath Piltover, and so it smells like shit. That's why these police officers or enforcers wear masks so they don't smell the poo-poo. Now, within the span of about 30 years in recent time, Jace was walking around in a snowstorm with his mother on the brink of death when a traveler comes and saves them, showing Jace his first glimpse at the power of magic by transporting the two of them to a safe location and handing Jace the rune he used to produce the spell. Who is this guy? We don't know. What is this stone? We don't know. We also have a Noxium by the name of Mel, one of the daughters of House Medarda, who's been banished due to her feeling sentiment towards her house's enemies, and she was sent off to Piltover to look over her house's involvement with the city. Coming from the extremely rich and powerful House Medarda, Mel gains a seat on the council of Piltover, but is trying to make a name for herself to separate her from her warmongering family. Now, some time ago, Piltover and the Lanes went into a civil war. This war was caused due to how the government of Piltover, ran by a council, was corrupt. This council, consisting of 6 members, along with Heimerdinger, a Yordle over 300 years old who saw the war between the mages firsthand, control everything that happens within Piltover and the Lanes. He's also the founding father of Piltover. Although Heimer is mostly ignorant to the problems within the two cities, the other members are there because of how influential their houses are and continue to use that influence to become even more powerful, ignoring the problems happening in both cities. Mostly the council just wants to keep Piltover safe, clean, and profitable. This led to a divide between the people of Piltover and the Lanes, since the Lanes smells like poo-poo, and they don't want the smell of poo-poo to come into Piltover. So what do? They use the power of their police force or enforcers to restrain the people who live in the Lanes. This made the people of the Lanes very angry and upset. They said,
"Open the country. Stop having it be closed."
And so they went into a civil war led by a man named Vander and Silco. Now, these two don't like each other anymore, and Vander tried to kill Silco. Why? We don't know, but we do know Silco called this unionization of the underground the Nation of Zon. This civil war caused a lot of enforcers and the citizens of the Lanes to die, and in this war, Jinx and Vi's parents were killed, leading Vander to adopt the two of them along with 2 other kids named Milo and Clagger. The 4 of them grow up in the shithole of the Lanes, where people are forced to commit crimes and deal in shady shit in order to keep afloat, because the enforcers do their best to keep the people of the Lanes out of Piltover thanks to a deal made between the head of the enforcers, Grayson, and the leader of the Lanes, Vander. Jace, completely obsessed at this point with figuring out how to use magic to the point of putting posters of magicians all over his bedroom, has become a student of the Piltover University, also known as the Academy, to further his advancement of science by working on a method of fusing science with magic called Hextech. To get funding for his research, he's backed by House Kiraman, one of the richest clans in Piltover and whose mother is also part of the council. However, the use of magic is banned from Piltover, and so to get a majority of what he needs to complete his creation, he travels to the Lanes in order to pick up illegal items he can't find in Piltover. This led him to a shop called Benzo's, where he immediately buys all of his best items from a kid named Echo, who follows him home to find out where he lives and gives that information to Vi. In order to make extra cash, Vi gets her brothers Milo and Clagger along with her sister Jinx to rob Jace and sell his stuff in the Lanes. Thinking it's going to be a big score and a way to get Vander to think they can do more high-end jobs, they break into Jace's apartment. Not knowing what they're looking at, they steal as much as they can while Powder goes into Jace's room and finds these blue crystals. Jace comes back with one of his friends, Caitlin, who's also the daughter of Mrs. Kiraman. Caitlin grew up hell-bent on becoming one of the best marksmen of her house, practicing her aim in competition auditions in order to follow her dream to become an enforcer, looking up to Grayson as a role model. Right now, she's helping Jace carry his stuff back to his apartment after he went on another shopping spree in the lanes, and she's worried about how Jace acquired the items since he had to go into the lanes in order to procure them. Hearing one of them try and open the door, the kids make a run for it, and while Powder tries to stuff the blue crystals into her pocket, one of them drops on the floor, causing an explosion, decimating Jace's home and knocking Jace unconscious. After seeing what looks like a terrorist attack, the enforcers of Piltover chase the kids all the way back to the lanes, where they get jumped by a couple of kids led by Deckard that Silco paid to follow them. The kids fight them off while Powder tosses the bag of products that they just stole over a pier so she wouldn't get hurt. Meanwhile, Jace is being questioned by the head of the enforcers, Grayson, so she can report it to the council. Upon inspection of his destroyed home, she comes across all of the illegal equipment Jace has been purchasing from the Undercity. With her doing that inspection is a man named Victor, who grew up in the lanes along with Singed and is now the assistant of the head of the council, Heimerdinger. Originally from Piltover, Singed went to the lanes in order to continue his experimentation with chemistry, where he crossbred different animals to create a pet named Rio. Victor as a child became fascinated with Rio and Singed, but quickly realized what Singed was doing to keep Rio alive was monstrous, cutting ties with him and continuing his own studies. Seeing as Jace might be dangerous to Piltover, they place him under arrest so the council can try him to see if he can still be at the academy. Meanwhile, Vi and the kids get back to Vander, who now works as the owner of a bar called The Last Drop. Furious that the kids went on a job in the upper city, he heads to where the kids got their tip from to smooth things over since they lost all of the loot that they stole after consoling Vi. As he leaves, Powder overhears Milo telling Vi how useless Powder is, saying she's trash and heart-stuck diamond, leading to Powder getting very upset. Vander heads into Benzo's shop and is soon joined by Grayson and her right-hand man Marcus. She tries to convince Vander to give up the person responsible so then the people of Piltover can relax, but more importantly, the council. Vander refuses, and Grayson tells him that she'll have to bring more enforcers down into the lanes and they'll have to get more serious, leaving Vander with the scroll for him to use if he ever changes his mind. Silco, who's now gone underground since his fight with Xander, has been creating concoction named Shimmer with the help of Singed. Together, the two of them create piles of Shimmer that they begin to use on Deckard as their first human test subject. Also, Silco jams this thing into his eye all the time. What it does, we don't know. That night, Heimerdinger joins Jace inside of his cell to try and convince him to not talk about trying to harness magic at his trial because it's too dangerous. The next day, Jace heads into his trial and talks about trying to harness magic. This upsets the council, leading them to expel Jace from the academy and to destroy all of his belongings related to Hextech. Jace wants to commit seppuku, but Victor stops him and says, "You drop this, king," telling Jace he wants to work with him to create Hextech together. Meanwhile, in the lanes, the enforcers raid the city using police brutality, but come up with zero leads as to who the culprits are. However, the brutality that the enforcers showed created a divide between the people of the lanes and Vander. Feeling as though Vander isn't doing anything to stop Piltover from walking all over the lanes, people begin leaving his side and joining up with Silco instead, seeing as he's shown to be more proactive about the situation, most notably Savika. We don't really know much about her. Knowing that Vander is now in trouble with the enforcers, Silco decides to meet up with Marcus, Grayson's right-hand man, and tells him who caused the explosion in Piltover. At first, Marcus doesn't want to oblige, but after hearing about the power of magic, the council orders the enforcers to find whoever caused the explosion to be captured by any means necessary. This forces Marcus to visit the lanes again in hopes to capture the kids, but is eventually thwarted by Vander. Leaving to get more reinforcements, Vi gets a hold of Vander's scroll to contact Grayson and sets up a rendezvous in Benzo's shop. Vander catches wind of this and heads over just in time to lock Vi away and offer himself to the enforcers. They reluctantly take him in, but not before, surprise, Silco joins the party with a newly enhanced Deckard, who slaughters Grayson, Benzo, and her other officers besides Marcus, capturing Vander and taking him to their hideout. Echo sees the slaughter with his own eyes and comes to rescue Vi so she can grab the other kids to help out. Afraid that she'll lose Powder, she tells her to stay put, giving her a flare gun to shoot off if she ever needs help, and she does not take it very well. In fact, she loses her mind until she finds out that the explosion was caused by the blue crystal she found at Jace's apartment. Thinking that she can finally be of help, she rushes over to Silco's hideout. During all of this, Jace and Victor break into the academy, and Victor helps Jace finally stabilizing his hex tech creation and getting a breakthrough, proving the technology works, with Heimerdinger witnessing the power that the two created, with Mel chiming in saying it's a new era. The kids find Vander, and while Vi fights off Silco's henchmen, Milo and Clagger get Vander out of his trap, looking like they're going to make a successful escape when Powder shows up and tosses the blue crystal into the factory, having it explode and killing Milo and Clagger, while also destroying Savika's left arm. With Vander at his wit's end, he fights off Deckard before Silco stabs him in the back, having him fall to his death, only to recover by intaking a fuck ton of shimmer. Now, with the strength of at least 3 full-grown elks, Vander kills off Deckard and saves Vi before plummeting to his death. Jinx finds out what she's done, and Vi gets so upset that she punches her in the face and walks off. Thinking that Vi has abandoned her, Powder quickly grows resentment towards her sister, so when Silco comes to try and finish off Vi, but only seeing Powder, he takes her under his wing, welcoming Powder to his defunct family. Seeing that Powder is being comforted by Silco, Vi attempts to try and rescue her, but Marcus chloroforms Vi and takes her to prison, where they continually beat and assault her for the next couple of years. During this time, a few things have happened in both the lanes and Piltover. In Piltover, Jace created the hex gates that transport trading ships from one place to another and has become the star pupil of the academy, making the citizens of Piltover, especially the council, even more rich. However, in their spare time, Jace and Victor also found a way to harness the power of these blue crystals and forge them into what's called hex gems that are way more stable and can be used to power hex tech equipment. To much of her family's distaste, Caitlyn followed her dreams and became an enforcer, but still feels like she's being babied by her family by not allowing her to patrol more of the streets of Piltover. In the lanes, Silco has become the kingpin of crime, with Powder by his side, now going by the name of Jinx, and has taken over Vander's Bar, the last drop, as his new hideout. Along with him, we have 5 other characters that we don't really know much about, besides a jaw guy named Finn and mask girl named Rennie. All 5 of them are chem barons working under the new reign of Silco, who are enjoying the profits they're gaining so far from the production of shimmer over the past couple of years. Now, without any pushback from Vander, Silco has mass-produced shimmer, which is like a high fantasy edgy version of meth to get people addicted, as he sells it off to the upper city, paying off the enforcers to let the shipments pass through. However, shimmer has a side effect of permanently disfiguring you if you take it too frequently, while also enhancing all of your senses when high off the drug. It can also be used to power technology and heal wounds. It's like a miracle drug with really bad side effects. In order to get shimmer into Piltover, Silco has Marcus, who is now the head of the enforcers, under his thumb, and threatens that if he was ever going to have second thoughts about their partnership, he would basically kill off his daughter. So Marcus lets Silco slide and orders the enforcers to turn a blind eye when it comes to Silco and his shimmer. The only pushback Silco receives is from a gang called Firelights, made up of people who either used to be addicts from shimmer or come from a broken family because of it, led by the now older Echo. On Piltover's Progress Day, a celebration of Piltover's scientific success where they unveil all the top-notch creations the Academy has created over the past year, Jace and Victor pitch to Heimerdinger their Hextech creations, but since Heimer thinks it might be too ahead of its time and lead to dangerous ramifications, he pushes their idea aside. This makes the two upset, so Jace goes to his sugar mama Mel, where she tells him he should just present what he's worked on. Jace makes a speech and decides not to present what he's worked on. Meanwhile, Silco is transporting a large amount of shimmer into Piltover, led by Savika, when the Firelights attack Silco's henchmen. They trap most of them before Jinx reveals herself, killing almost every Firelight while at the same time injuring one of Silco's men and destroying the shimmer in the process. This pisses off Savika and proves to her that Jinx is an unstable person that they just cannot control, so after the attack she heads back to Silco to debrief, but Silco stands with Jinx, thinking she can do no wrong, but to ease the tension with his cronies, he decides to bench Jinx for the time being. When Caitlyn goes to investigate, we find one of the henchmen that Jinx shot is hiding on the blimp, and before she can question him, Marcus shows up to tell her to leave since it's above her pay grade. To try and cover things up, Marcus then sends the man over to prison where he meets up with Vi, leading to his death. Jinx, upset that Silco benched her, takes it as an insult and instead decides to steal Jace's work on Hex Tech by taking a Hex Gem while causing an explosion at the Progress Day Fairgrounds, leading to the deaths of 6 enforcers, with Caitlyn witnessing all of it. Feeling as though this could lead into even more serious consequences with the power that Hex Gems hold, Jace tries to persuade the council into stopping all Hex Tech research. This would cause the Hex Gates to become inactive, making a huge blow to the council's financial gain off of Jace and Victor's inventions. Instead, they decide to recruit Jace into the council so he could lead them into making sure the Hex Gems are safe, even though Jace wants nothing to do with it. Confused and overwhelmed with his new position, he obliges while still trying to find his footing in the political atmosphere of Piltover. One of his first moves was to look over why the blimp was even carrying Shimmer in the first place by checking the delivery manuscripts and finding the inconsistencies of multiple shipments. This puts a fire underneath Marcus, who's trying his best to clean up the entire situation, so he goes over to Silco to try and figure out what he's supposed to do. So Silco hands over one of Jinx's grenades to try and get Jace off of his back by saying it's from the firelights. Caitlyn, hoping she can find the culprit of who caused the explosions so she can report it to Marcus and put an end to the Lane's uprising, goes rogue when Jace tells her that her parents want her in a new position behind a desk to keep her safe. She decides to visit the prison where Vi is being held, called the Stillwater Hold, so she can get her out and have Vi lead her to whoever is in charge. Caitlyn gets Jace to write a release form for Vi and hands it over to the head of the prison, and the two head into the Undercity and enter a brothel where things get kinky with Vi and Caitlyn while we see a gimp Yordle walking around. Meanwhile, Victor becomes enthralled of magic and creates what's called a hex core. How it works, we have no idea, but Victor is dying and whatever we can do in order to save him, god damn it, we're going to try. Jinx, now in possession of one of the hex gems, learns about the power it can produce, even though Silco was extremely upset with Jinx's recent attack on Piltover. He sees this as a means to an end to create a device that could render the city of Piltover powerless. Pivoting his plan to now create this powerful device, he backs up Jinx during her creation of this new weapon. Trying to find his footing in the political sphere of Piltover, Jace trips over his own naiveness and falls straight into Mel's vagina, where they have sex. Mel becomes infatuated with Jace, and the two create a power couple conjoining House Medarda, Talus, and the Kiramans. While others were busy fucking, Victor was busy studying the Hex Core, but it leads to him passing out and having Jace come to his bedside, regretting that he finally has technology to help people in need right now, but is being stopped because the people are afraid of change and not looking at the actual problems the world is facing. This leads to Jace's time being thinned out, trying to figure out how to protect Piltover, how to continue his research for Hex Tech, and how to save Victor's life. So the two begin working on the Hex Core that has had promising results on plant life so far, but after a few seconds, the plant life immediately begins to die at a rapid pace. Hoping this is the answer, the two dive into trying to figure out more about the Hex Core until they are eventually stopped by Heimerdinger, giving a forewarning that the war he keeps mentioning was created by a device that looks exactly like the Hex Core they created. Meanwhile, in the lanes, Vi attacks Savika, who has her newly created arm powered by Shimmer. In the final moments of the fight, Savika stabs Vi, fatally wounding her, and drops the bomb that Jinx is now working with Silco. With Vi wounded, Savika escapes and heads back over to the last drop to inform Silco that Vi was still alive. Confused, Silco visits Marcus's house since he had originally informed him that Vi was dead. Hoping to smoke out the two characters, Silco tells Marcus that Caitlyn and Vi cannot make it back into Piltover, and so Marcus hands over Jinx's bomb to Jace, saying it came from the firelights. Thinking that the lanes are out of control, Jace orders the enforcers to block off the bridges from the lanes leading into Piltover to not allow any more lane citizens from coming into the city. With Shimmer now becoming more rampant and the Undercity now attacking Piltover, the council holds a meeting where Jace moves to kick out Heimerdinger due to his ignorance of the problems berating both cities, leading to a unanimous decision to force Heimerdinger into retirement. Meanwhile, Jinx finds out that Silco is running around the lanes trying to capture two girls, and so she knocks out Savika in order to learn more about what's going on. Savika spills the beans about Vi still being alive and that she's looking for her, so Jinx runs off to try and be reunited with her sister. With Vi seriously injured from her fight with Savika, Caitlyn gets a remedy to help her out with the help of a crackhead named Huck, but after delivering the potion to Vi, they are immediately outed by the same crackhead. To escape, Vi punches a tower power very hard and has the whole thing collapse, stopping Silco in his tracks and scoring a nice pentakill. Running away, Vi spots the flare that she gave Jinx and goes to finally meet her after all of her years in prison. When Jinx finds out Vi has been working with an enforcer, she starts to snap, and as things look like it's going to be resolved between the two sisters, the Firelights ambush the group, stealing away Vi and taking the Hex Gem Jinx had gotten earlier. Meanwhile, feeling like Victor has nowhere else to turn, he heads to the lanes and meets up with Singed once again to try to find some answer to keep himself alive. Singed offers him a variant of Shimmer, and Victor limps off to see if the concoction would help in his survival, knowing that if he were to begin injecting himself with the variant, it would potentially lead to Piltover outcasting him. During his stay in the lanes, the blockade comes into effect with a huge amount of pushback from the citizens of the lanes, and Victor bypasses this blockade to return to Piltover in order to test out the variant of Shimmer that Singed gave to him. Jace gets upset over Victor heading into the lanes, saying that the people there are dangerous, making Victor upset considering that he also came from the lanes. Now, with the bridges being blocked under Jace's ruling, the Chem Barons, who have been happy with the profits they've been receiving off of Shimmer, become worried that Silco is too invested in a rebellion instead of their own profits. With the blockade separating the lanes from Piltover, the Chem Barons' profits begin to plummet, and so Silco comes to their meeting to forcibly persuade them into accepting the rebellion he's trying to upstart. This creates friction between the Chem Barons and Silco, so Finn begins to form a coup in order to overthrow Silco as the kingpin of the lanes. Thinking that Silco has betrayed her, Jinx corners him as he tries to manipulate her into thinking that Vi and Caitlyn are just after the Hex Gem and don't actually care about Jinx or her well-being. He's successful enough and puts Jinx on the right track to continue working on the Hex weapon to start up the rebellion between Piltover and the lanes. Thinking that the lanes have a way to create Hex tech weaponry as they reverse engineer the bomb they think is from the Firelights, Mel suggests that Jace starts to create countermeasures for that future by also producing Hex tech weaponry, to which Jace and Victor are both against, seeing as their vision of Hex tech is supposed to save lives and not destroy them. Victor finally tests out how his body would react to the variant of Shimmer coupled together with the power of the Hex Gore, as it begins to morph his body enough to allow him to walk and run without needing to use his cane. Meanwhile, Vi and Caitlyn find out that the leader of the Firelights is Echo and convince him that returning the Hex Gem is the best course of action to stop the bloodshed between Piltover and the lanes. Trusting Vi, Echo goes along with their plan and decides to head back to Piltover to try and smooth things out between the two cities, but are stopped by Marcus and a group of enforcers blocking off one of the bridges back into Piltover. Caitlyn tries to tell Marcus she has proof that Silco has been scheming against Piltover when Marcus reveals that he's been working with Silco and shoots Echo in the chest, who's wearing plot armor that stopped the bullet from penetrating his body. Right when Marcus was about to kill off Caitlyn, a bunch of what looks like Firelights, which are these bugs that live in the lanes, begins to flood the bridge, only to find out when it's too late that they're actually explosives that Jinx created to wipe out the enforcers on the bridge, leading to Marcus's death and killing off the enforcers on the bridge. How every enforcer died and not Echo or Caitlyn, we have no idea. Vi comes back to find out what happened to Caitlyn and Echo when Jinx shows up. Knowing the Hex Gem is more important, Echo gives Caitlyn and Vi the gem while he fights off Jinx. The two get into a brawl, with Echo coming out as the winner, but when he begins to feel sorry for Jinx, she detonates one of her bombs, nearly killing herself and leaving Echo with a broken leg. How they both survived a point-blank explosion? Again, we have no idea. After hearing about the explosion, Silco heads to the bridge and rescues Jinx, who was able to swipe the Hex Gem back from Caitlyn, Vi, and Echo, and decides to bring her back to Singe's lair in hopes that he can resuscitate her using a variant of Shimmer. The process proves to be successful and Jinx is brought to full health. Meanwhile, Caitlyn sneaks Vi into her room at her house, only to be confronted by Caitlyn's parents. After hearing what Caitlyn has gone through, Mrs. Kierman agrees to let the two speak in front of the council to try and persuade them into stopping Silco from starting a war. Finn begins to recruit members of Silco's gang into joining the Chem Barons coup to overthrow Silco, and tries to persuade Savika into joining him, since she's more in charge of what's happening with Silco's plans, more so than Silco is. Savika has none of it and shoos Finn away while she continues to work on upgrading her arm. Hearing about the uproar in Piltover, Mel's mother comes all the way from the city of Noxus to try and convince Mel to help persuade Jace into creating creating Hextech weaponry to aid her in an upcoming war she's planning to wage against the people that killed her son Kino. Mel wants nothing to do with it, still upset about being banished from their household, but Mel's mother stays persistent, knowing that her household doesn't have the amount of resources compared to a rival clan that's going to continue to attack the Medarda house, so she needs the creation of Hextech weaponry to gain an upper hand and hopes that Mel can help expedite the process and come back to Noxus unbanished as a reward. To help persuade Jace, Mrs. Medarda shows him her titties as a form of dominance to coerce him into creating Hextech weaponry. He says, "What are you doing, stepmom?" before saying fuck it. Jace goes to the council, who are upset that they're losing profits because of the rift being made between Piltover and the lanes, and Caitlyn and Vi join the meeting to try and make the council woke about the problems happening in the Undercity and that Silco wants to separate the lanes from Piltover, while also admitting that Jinx was actually the creator of the bomb. This makes Jace worried about the Hex Gem the lanes have access to and proposes that Piltover should go to war to take the Hex Gem by force. The council disagrees, not wanting to shed any more blood, and decides to try and reason with Silco instead so as not to cause a war. This pisses off Vi, who thinks Silco can't be reasoned with, and storms out of the meeting, parting ways with Caitlyn, seeing as the two cities will never meet eye to eye. Jace, also upset with what the council said, joins forces with Vi to try and take down Silco and his plan for war. Victor, on the other hand, still obsessed with the Hex Core and now with Shimmer as well, tries to further augment himself but realizes that he no longer has any more of the Shimmer that Singed had originally given him. Knowing that he can't go back to the lanes as of right now with the tension rising between the two cities, he tries to access the power of the Hex Core once more, only for it to backfire and completely disintegrate Sky, one of his assistants that was trying to help. Meanwhile, Heimerdinger, now retired from the council, travels to the lanes to see how bad it actually is when he finds an injured Echo at the bottom of the bridge where the explosion Jinx caused happened, and decides to help him get back to his hideout in the lanes, seeing how well crafted the hoverboard Echo created is. Heimer sees Echo's hideout and begins helping and mentoring Echo and his inventions. Tired of the city of Piltover not doing anything, Jace and Vi head into one of Silco's production facilities to try and stop the flow of Shimmer and cause the Chembarons to try and turn on Silco. They infiltrate one of Silco's buildings and fight off a bunch of super Shimmer crackheads, ultimately leading to Jace accidentally killing the child of one of Silco's top leaders of the Undercity, Rennie. Feeling like the mission was a mistake, he refuses to work with Vi, and the two part ways as Jinx breaks into Caitlyn's house, now infused with Shimmer, and kidnaps her. With Rennie's child dead and their supply of Shimmer now low, Silco's top brass attempt to overthrow him in a meeting with Finn, Rennie, Savika, and Silco, but at the last minute when Silco felt like he was losing a grip on the Chembarons, Savika kills off Finn, putting them back into their place. Trying to find some kind of way to create peace between Piltover and the lanes, Jace attempts to make a deal with Silco to try and stop the endless amount of violence. The two meet up, with Silco's demands for peace being to separate the two cities from one another, grant Silco and his people a pardon for everything that has happened, gain unrestricted access to the Hex Gates, not having to pay to use trade routes, and the ability to create their own government without Piltover's meddling. In return, Silco would stop the production of Shimmer and return the Hex Gem, but to close the deal, Jace required Jinx to be turned in and sent off to their prison in Stillwater. This part of the deal is a huge blow to Silco, who only wants to make the lanes its own privately governed city just like Vander, but can't get to it without sacrificing Jinx, who he cares deeply about. Jinx overhears Silco's dilemma and decides to capture him as well, thinking that he was going to give her up. Jace confronts the council about his new deal with the Kingpin to officially separate the two cities from one another, sending the council into an uproar. Meanwhile, Vi confronts Savika again, this time with her newly acquired Hextech gauntlets, and gets into a fight with her to try and take out more of Silco's men. Vi ends up ripping Savika's arm off and throws her into a jukebox before Jinx captures her as well, bringing all three of the people she captured to the warehouse Vander, Milo, and Clagger all died in. She gives Vi an ultimatum to kill off Caitlyn and put everything behind them, but Vi refuses, leading to Caitlyn finding a way to escape from her constraints and holding Jinx at gunpoint, but Jinx gets the upper hand and knocks her out. As a last resort to try and stop Vi from controlling Jinx, Silco grabs Jinx's gun and attempts to shoot Vi, but Jinx Jinx gets trigger happy, shooting Silco instead. Hearing that Silco wasn't going to give up Jinx and was going to go to war instead of accepting the peace treaty, Jinx snaps and officially takes the moniker of Jinx along with the Hex Gem to finally construct the Hex Tech weapon Silco had been trying to get Jinx to finish. With the council finally siding with Jace's peace treaty with Silco and Mel completely removing herself from House Medarda, Jinx fires off a rocket straight into the council's meeting room when the rocket impacts the room, ending season 1 of Arcane. And that's the story of Arcane fully explained. However, there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered, and with Riot confirming that production of Arcane Season 2 is already underway, here are the plot holes that still need to be filled. We don't know who this guy is and if he's even relevant to the story at all besides being just some dude that inspired Jace to pursue magic. It could be someone related to Ryze or Ryze himself, but we don't know for sure. We still don't know what this rune is and if it's important to the story at all. We don't know where the crystals come from, whether it's from the Brackern or if it's just being retconned. Maybe we'll get some insight into how Shurima functions in the next season and if Jace will have to come to grips with being part of destroying an entire species. We still don't know what brought Silco and Vander to get into a fight with each other in the first place. Did Heimer see the actual rune wars or was it something completely different? We see what looks like Vander being changed into Warwick as well as Singed holding what looks like a pendant with a picture of what is more than likely his daughter, who could be Orianna. So that could lead to them being characters being introduced into the next season. What's going to happen to Marcus's daughter now that he's dead? Is season 2 going to continue the storylines of these characters? And if so, are Vi and Jace the main characters of the overall mainstream storyline for League of Legends now? Overall, I think Arcane is one of the best Western animated TV shows out there, and I would hope that the next season comes out in the next 2 years just to keep riding the hype around it. I still think there are problems with the show, and I hope that they continue to expand on it more, and I hope that they just release the next season all at once instead of being sectioned off weekly. I also hope that season 2 doesn't kill off more secondary characters. As much as I enjoy seeing League champions placed into a cinematic, it's becoming harder and harder to grow attached to the side characters when I feel like they're just going to be killed off. The only 2 big side characters that have remained since Act 1 are just Mel and Savika, and I would have loved to explore Marcus's character more, or even Skye. The biggest problem that I find is that the League champions obviously have a lot of plot armor considering this is a prequel, and so they can't kill them off, and if they do, that's extremely ballsy, which is fine. But if there's ever a war, I can't say that the stakes feel high enough when I know that every League champion is safe in a world that feels like it's so imbalanced that anyone can die. Now, I wouldn't be saying this if the side characters weren't also dying at a rapid pace, being placed into these same exact scenarios that the League champions are in. Marcus dying and losing an entire arm when the bomb is inches from Caitlyn's face, but she only gets a couple of scratches that are seemingly immediately healed over the course of a night without so much as a limp makes absolutely no sense to me. How Jinx's kamikaze bomb that explodes right next to her body but only garners a couple of burn marks also makes no sense. I'm not saying that these characters should die, but if they're going to be in these deadly situations, I would think they would walk away from them with more than just a scratch or a broken leg, just because it would feel more realistic. I would love to see the side characters get more of a spotlight like Mel, but I also don't want them to just become a League champ because that would create even more plot armor for characters. But that is Arcane. Now that's all over, what do you guys think? On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate the show? What do you think is going to happen in season 2? And what are the unanswered questions you guys have from season 1? More importantly, which League champs do you think will be introduced in the next season? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Squeeze.